devoted husband, a trusted friend, a man in the prime of his life. Gone in an instant, his death ruled as natural. A tragedy, but nothing more. But behind the scenes, something wasn't adding up. A healthy 38-year-old man doesn't just collapse without reason. Family grieved, friends mourned, but for those who looked closer, something felt off. It wasn't until the quiet whispers turned into urgent questions that the truth began to surface. And when it did, it shattered everything. What was first seen as a personal tragedy would soon unravel into something far more calculated, far more chilling. A wife's devotion or a carefully constructed deception. A marriage built on love or something much darker. When the pieces finally came together, the truth wasn't just shocking. It was unthinkable. This is the story of Malik Turner, and the secret that was never meant to be found. To the outside world, Jasmine Turner was a woman to admire, a respected pharmacist, a pillar of her community, intelligent, driven, and always in control. She built a life that others envied, a beautiful home, financial success, a marriage that seemed unshakable. But appearances can be deceiving. At her side was Malik Turner, a dedicated husband, an IT specialist, a man who took pride in the stability he had worked so hard to create. He was steady, reliable, and deeply in love with his wife. If Jasmine had secrets, he either didn't know or chose not to see. But not everything stays hidden forever. Beneath the polished surface of their life together, something was beginning to shift. Something subtle at first, unanswered questions, missing details, an unease that lingered just out of reach. Friends would later recall moments that seemed insignificant at the time. Malik mentioning that money had gone missing from their accounts, that Jasmine was distracted, that she dismissed his concerns too quickly, with a confidence that left no room for further discussion. But Malik was a careful man, a man who noticed things. And as the inconsistencies piled up, so did his suspicions. The city of Atlanta moved around them, fast-paced and unforgiving, a place of opportunity, ambition, and for some deception. By day, Jasmine played her part flawlessly, professional, compassionate, always one step ahead. But behind closed doors, the cracks in her carefully constructed life were beginning to show. A marriage that once felt secure now carried an unspoken weight. A husband who had always trusted his wife now found himself questioning what he thought he knew. Malik had spent years building a future with Jasmine, believing in the woman he had married. But as his concerns grew, so did the distance between them. The conversations became shorter, the silences longer, and through it all, Jasmine remained composed. Too composed. The truth was waiting just beneath the surface. And soon, Malik Turner would have no choice but to confront it. It was February of 2019 when Malik Turner's life came to a sudden and shocking halt. A man who had always been in control, strong, steady, and reliable, was now on the brink of something that would leave everyone around him reeling. It started as something subtle. He woke up feeling off, dizzy, fatigued, drenched in sweat. The kind of symptoms that didn't immediately raise alarms, but enough to make him take notice. His health, always a point of pride, had begun to falter. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. What followed next seemed like a nightmare. Malik's condition worsened in a matter of days. His weakness intensified, his energy drained. His body, once strong and resilient, seemed to betray him without warning. To anyone who knew Malik, it was a shock. His life had been full of late nights, long hours at work, but never anything that would explain such a rapid decline. Then, just days after his symptoms first appeared, Malik was gone. No warning, no time to prepare, no chance to fight back. And Jasmine Turner, his wife, was left to pick up the pieces. She was a grieving widow now, the woman who had lost her husband far too soon. Or so it seemed. At first, there was little cause for suspicion. Malik's death was ruled as natural causes. No foul play suspected. A shock to those who knew him, but nothing more than the tragic loss of a loved one. Family and friends gathered, grieving the unexpected death of a man who was known for his unwavering support and devotion. But even as the community mourned, Jasmine seemed to move on much faster than anyone expected. She played the part of the grieving wife, of course, publicly, but behind closed doors, her behavior raised questions. Days after Malik's funeral, she made purchases that felt, well, out of place. Lavish jewelry, a new property, a vintage 1965 classic car that seemed a curious decision at a time of mourning. Friends and family, unsure whether they should be concerned, whispered about her quick recovery from the tragedy. But what was more unsettling was how she avoided deeper conversations about her husband's death. No talks of grief, no desire to talk about Malik's life or the suddenness of it all. Just a swift return to her routines, as though nothing had changed. Wasn't long before Detective Andre Carter took notice of this strange pattern. Carter, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and unyielding focus, found something in Malik's case that didn't sit right. Something about the timing, the suddenness of his death, and the inexplicable way Jasmine carried on with her life. His curiosity grew. He began digging into Malik's medical records, his financial background, and, most importantly, Jasmine's dealings. What Carter found wasn't just an ordinary case. There were threads, subtle but undeniable, that hinted at something much darker beneath the surface. A deeper story, one that had been hidden all along, and one that Jasmine had gone to great lengths to conceal. And as Detective Carter dug deeper into Jasmine's past, her financial dealings, her ties to people who would later prove to be important in this case, he began to uncover a truth that, once revealed, would change everything. Nothing would ever be the same. What he discovered next changed everything. In the aftermath of Malik Turner's sudden death, the case seemed to fade into the background. But Detective Andre Carter's instincts told him there was more to this tragedy than met the eye. What no one could have predicted was that a simple investigation into a grieving widow's life would unravel a web of deceit and betrayal that had been carefully woven for years. Enter Marcus Fields, a financial investigator whose experience in uncovering fraudulent schemes would soon put him at the center of a shocking discovery. As he delved into Jasmine's financial history, the pieces began to fit together in a way no one could have imagined. What appeared to be a prosperous, well-respected career was built on a foundation of lies. Jasmine Turner wasn't just a successful pharmacist. She wasn't just a community figurehead. She was a master manipulator, running a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme right under the noses of those closest to her. She had managed to convince investors that she was securing lucrative government contracts, an illusion carefully crafted over time. They trusted her. They believed in her. They had no idea that their investments were nothing more than a house of cards, destined to collapse at any moment. The scheme was faltering. The money was running out, and Jasmine was running out of options. As a financial investigator uncovered more details, it became clear. The fraud had gone on for far too long, and the truth was now just a ticking time bomb. And then, something changed. Malik, the man who had once stood by his wife, began to ask questions. As the truth began to leak through the cracks, Malik had started to notice discrepancies. He'd seen the lavish spending, the extravagant lifestyle, the unaccounted for money. Something didn't add up. He had known Jasmine to be ambitious, but the sudden surge of wealth, it raised red flags. It was clear now. Malik had begun to see the cracks in his wife's carefully constructed facade. He confronted her, demanding answers, threatening to expose her. Those who knew Malik say he was relentless in his pursuit of the truth, and he wasn't about to let his wife's secrets remain buried. But what happened next was chilling. The questions Malik asked would soon be the last ones he ever uttered. Could his death have been linked to Jasmine's fraudulent dealings? Could the same woman who once loved him, the woman who built a life together with him, have taken his life to protect her own empire of lies? As the investigators followed the trail, the theory began to emerge. Malik's sudden illness, his mysterious death, it all seemed to line up with something far darker than anyone had suspected. Could this have been a calculated act of murder? Was Malik's life taken not by chance, but by design? Suspicion fell on poisoning. The idea was no longer a mere theory. It became the lens through which every piece of evidence was now being examined. And that's when Dr. Carla Brooks, a forensic pathologist with a reputation for uncovering hidden truths, became involved. Dr. Brooks ordered an exhumation of Malik's body. The thought was almost too difficult to comprehend. How could anyone have poisoned a man so loved, so respected? Yet, the evidence demanded it. The body was exhumed for advanced testing. And what they found, well, it was a revelation no one could have prepared for. Inside Malik's system, something extraordinary was discovered. Non-prescribed insulin. Insulin, administered in a way that could only point to deliberate poisoning. The medical examiner's report was clear. Malik Turner hadn't died of natural causes. His death was no accident. He had been murdered. Jasmine Turner's world was about to come crashing down. The truth was no longer hidden. The picture of a grieving widow, the story of a sudden death, was a facade, a carefully constructed lie. The real story, the one that had been buried beneath layers of deception, was far more chilling. Malik had not died by chance. He had died because he stood in the way of his wife's empire of lies. And now, as the truth about the fraud and the murder began to surface, it raised an even darker question. How far was Jasmine willing to go to protect her secret? November 2021, the moment the world had been waiting for. The truth that had been painstakingly uncovered was finally set to unfold in the stark light of the courtroom. Jasmine Turner, the respected pharmacist, the grieving widow, now found herself facing the most serious charge anyone could imagine: first-degree murder. The accusations were shocking, but as the layers of deception peeled back, it became clear that Jasmine was not the woman she had claimed to be. The evidence was damning, piece by piece. Each detail brought investigators closer to the conclusion they had been chasing for months. Text messages between Jasmine and her associates revealed a side of her that no one had seen. Hidden among words of concern and calm were fragments of fear. Fear of being caught. Fear of the empire she had built collapsing under the weight of her own lies. Financial stress weighed heavily on her shoulders, and it showed. The messages painted a picture of a woman who had been cornered, a woman whose desperation was beginning to surface. Then there was the security footage. In the days leading up to Malik's death, Jasmine was seen purchasing insulin, non-prescribed, dangerous insulin that would soon be linked directly to her husband's death. The footage was clear, undeniable. It wasn't just a coincidence. The woman who had once played the role of the loving spouse was now revealed as the mastermind behind her husband's untimely demise. The images were unsettling. What had once been an ordinary shopping trip now stood as the key to unraveling everything. But it didn't stop there. Bank records provided the final nail in the coffin. Days after Malik's death, Jasmine's financial transactions were carefully examined. What had once seemed like a random series of deposits and withdrawals now revealed a far more calculated plan. Jasmine had been laundering money, using Malik's life insurance money to cover her tracks. The lavish purchases, the trips, the new property, it was all part of a larger scheme. As Malik had grown suspicious, Jasmine had moved swiftly, shifting money around, making sure the truth remained buried under layers of deception. The same woman who had been crying at her husband's funeral was the one who had orchestrated his murder, all to protect her crumbling empire. Jasmine's response was swift, almost rehearsed. She denied everything. She claimed that Malik had diabetes, a lie she had crafted on the spot. Friends and family members, those who had once trusted her, now looked on in disbelief. They had seen the signs, her behavior, her coldness. At the funeral, Jasmine had not shed a single tear. To those who were closest to her lack of grief was as telling as any confession. It was as if the loss of her husband, her partner in crime, had meant nothing to her at all. As the case continued to unfold, the city of Atlanta found itself divided. The African American community, in particular, found themselves caught between disbelief and suspicion. Some couldn't believe that a woman who had been so well respected, so admired, could be capable of such a heinous act. They had known her for years, seen her thrive in her profession, contributed to the community. How could this be the same person? For others, however, the truth was clearer. There had always been something off, something hidden beneath the surface. They had suspected something was wrong, but even they couldn't have imagined the depth of Jasmine's betrayal. But the story wasn't over. In fact, what would come next would shock everyone once again. The trial, now looming on the horizon, promised to reveal even darker truths. Truths that no one could have foreseen. What had driven Jasmine to this point? What other secrets were buried beneath the surface? Could this be the beginning of an even darker chapter? One that would expose not just a murder, but the true nature of the woman at the center of it all. The trial would soon begin, and as the world prepared to watch, it became clear there was still much more to uncover. What lay hidden beneath Jasmine Turner's perfect facade would soon be exposed for all to see. And when the truth finally emerged, it would turn everything they thought they knew about her upside down. The courtroom was packed. Tension hung thick in the air as the trial of Jasmine Turner began. For months, the community had followed her every move, watched her journey from the grieving widow to the woman facing the darkest of charges. Now, it was time for the truth to be laid bare, for the pieces of the puzzle to fall into place. The prosecutors wasted no time. Their case was methodical, driven by evidence that painted a damning portrait of a woman willing to sacrifice everything to cover up her crimes. Their central argument was clear. Jasmine Turner killed her husband, Malik, to prevent him from exposing her massive fraud, a fraud that spanned years, built on lies and deception. The details were staggering. Jasmine had lured investors with promises of guaranteed returns, claiming she had secured lucrative government contracts that never existed. She had duped them, just as she had duped Malik. And when he grew suspicious, when he threatened to uncover the truth, Jasmine took matters into her own hands. The testimony from Dr. Carla Brooks, the forensic pathologist, was a crucial turning point. Dr. Brooks had conducted an exhaustive examination of Malik's body after it was exhumed. Her findings were irrefutable. Insulin poisoning. A toxic dose of non-prescribed insulin had been found in Malik's system, the cause of his sudden, unexpected death. It wasn't a medical condition. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. The evidence was clear, and it placed Jasmine at the center of it all. Then, the prosecution presented their final bombshell. A former associate of Jasmine's. This person, someone who had once been close to her, testified about Jasmine's growing financial desperation in the weeks leading up to Malik's death. They described a woman on the edge, someone who was beginning to panic as her Ponzi scheme teetered on the brink of collapse. They spoke of conversations filled with fear, of Jasmine expressing concerns that Malik would uncover the truth, that he would ruin everything she had worked so hard to conceal. And they testified that Jasmine had openly discussed the lengths she would go to in order to protect herself, no matter the cost. It was becoming clear. Jasmine Turner was no longer the woman the world had once admired. The cold, calculated nature of her actions had been laid bare. But despite the overwhelming evidence, Jasmine refused to accept responsibility. In a final attempt to deflect blame, she took the stand. She claimed she was being framed, that she had done nothing wrong. But it was too late. The inconsistencies in her story were too glaring, her cold demeanor too undeniable. She had never once shown remorse for the death of her husband. She had never once shown any real emotion at all. It was as if Malik had never mattered to her. And to those in the courtroom, that was the most damning evidence of all. The jury deliberated for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. When they returned, the verdict was delivered with chilling clarity. Jasmine Turner, the woman who had once been a trusted member of her community, was found guilty of first-degree murder. The room fell silent as the judge pronounced the sentence. life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was the end of a journey, but not the end of the story. Jasmine's life would be spent behind bars, her future forever marked by the choices she had made. But for the families of those she had deceived, for Malik's family and friends, the damage was done. A man's life had been taken, a community's trust shattered, and a dark truth had finally come to light. Jasmine Turner's trial had revealed everything there was to know about her. The facade, the lies, the manipulation, all of it was gone. And in the end, there was no escape from the truth. Her story was over, but the damage she had done, the lives she had ruined, would never be forgotten. The courtroom had fallen silent, but outside, the ripples of the trial spread far beyond the walls. Jasmine Turner's conviction was not the end of the story, but a new beginning for those affected by her lies. It wasn't just a community that had been deceived. It was a family, a life that had been torn apart, a future erased in the wake of her greed. Malik's family was shattered. They had lost a beloved husband, a father, and a brother, but they had also lost a sense of security they had once taken for granted. They spoke of their heartbreak, of how Malik's death had left a gaping hole in their lives. And his extended family, who had once celebrated Malik's achievements, now mourned his untimely and violent death. They had lost more than a man. They had lost a part of themselves. And then, there were the victims of Jasmine's Ponzi scheme. People who had placed their trust in her, who had invested their hard-earned money, believing she was the key to a prosperous future. But for many, that future never came. The reality was harsh. Their investments, their dreams, their hopes for a better life, all vanished into thin air. Some had lost their savings, others their homes, and a few had even lost their livelihoods. The victims were left with little more than the hollow promise of restitution that was never realized. In the end, the question that lingered in the minds of many was simple yet profound. How could a woman who had built a life on trust, on helping others, on being a pillar of her community, betray everyone around her? How could someone so seemingly devoted to her family, her career, and her community turn to such darkness? It wasn't just about money. It wasn't about the wealth or the luxury she had sought to accumulate at the expense of others. It was about deception. It was about manipulation. And, in the end, it was about murder. A life had been taken, a future stolen, all for the sake of greed. But this case, as tragic as it was, is not an isolated one. Jasmine Turner's story is a chilling reminder of how far some will go to hide their secrets, how easily the facade of a perfect life can crumble under the weight of truth. The world saw a successful, respected woman, but behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. And Jasmine Turner is not alone. Across the country, across the world, similar stories have played out. Stories of financial crimes that have cost people everything. Lives have been ruined, families torn apart, and futures destroyed. All for the sake of deception. And they won't be the last. In a follow-up episode, we'll explore other cases where financial crime has turned deadly, where the lies ran deep, and where the consequences were far more devastating than anyone could have imagined. These stories, like Jasmine Turner's, will leave you questioning how far people will go to protect their secrets, and what happens when they're caught. Until then, remember, behind every story of betrayal, there's a trail of destruction, and the truth is never as far away as we think. As we close this chapter, we want to hear from you. What do you think of Jasmine Turner's story? Were there clues we missed, or could this have been prevented? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We'll be reading them all. And stay tuned, because in the next episode, we'll uncover another shocking case. One that will make you question just how far people will go to keep their darkest secrets hidden. Don't miss it. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. We'll keep bringing you the stories that expose the hidden truths, the lies, and the consequences of betrayal. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until then, take care, and remember, the truth is never as far away as we think.